Here's my movie review, or review, whatever, of Return of the Living Dead, Part 2. This one came out in 1988, and I watched this one on YouTube because it was free with ads. I'll get straight to the point. This movie's alright, but does not hold up to the original. Not bad, but not fantastically good either. Watching it isn't a bad time, especially if you've never seen it before, or only the first one. There are good things in this movie, but the negative aspects are too big for me, and they outweigh it. But starting with the good, the movie was definitely funny, especially with how James Karen and Tom Matthews appear in this movie, despite having played characters that died in the first movie. Granted, they played totally different characters, but they parallel the story of the first movie, even making the same jokes, and then some where it's tongue-in-cheek and referencing the first movie. I liked this for the most part, though the end of their performances made me a little sad in a way. I had hoped that they would have done more in the story and had an actual plot role. But they were actually unnecessary to the story, and the main characters could have gone through the movie without them. Another thing I liked about the movie was how good the makeup and practical effects looked. There were more close-ups of the zombies in this one, and it really showed the horrific makeup the zombies had on, and was very believable. This was probably the best thing in the sequel when it comes to when it comes to novel, detailed things that they did. There were more things that I didn't care for in the movie than I did care for, unfortunately. The movie was clearly written by different people than the first movie, and it suffers from this, as the continuity suffers at times from how the characters fight the zombies, to even how interesting the movie ends up being. The movie is more family-friendly and polished than the original, which really didn't work as well to me. The most entertaining parts of the movie really were the ones with James Karen and Tom Matthews, mostly because of the satirical roles replicating parts from the first movie. The sequel came out in 1988 and was a sign of the times, in a way. It had the tropes of the older, bitchy sister with a teenage love, just the fact that there was a love interest thing at all, the annoying kid brother, and a random alcoholic old man with funny quips. These tropes weren't horrible, but they also weren't really something you'd expect from a sequel to a movie that had naked people in the first one. I'm not sure for sure, but I feel like they made this movie family-friendly for a reason. Perhaps with the thought of making more money than the original and appealing to a larger audience. It wasn't a great move, as this movie had less success than the original. The sequel just doesn't make sense when compared to the original. Somehow all the zombies were able to be killed at the end by being electrocuted at a power plant. It doesn't make sense. You basically couldn't kill the zombies in the original, as the reason why the original ended with the bombing of the city. If they could just electrocute them, why didn't any of the other things done in the first movie work? Obviously, the writers didn't give a crap about continuity. I feel like all the things that were great about the original movie were missing in the sequel. The grittiness, the dirtiness, the true yet funny jokes about the government, and the overly punk stereotypes. The iconically trashed and vandalized classic car, which, was that a 1957 Chevy Bel Air? With suicide on the, I think, side or the front of it, but either way, it's an icon, one of the icons, I feel, of the original movie. And one of the biggest points of the original movie was the group of punks and their reactions to the zombies. The sequel doesn't have any of that. No punks, no trashed classic cars. In fact, there was a polished and almost new type of red classic car the characters of Return 2 drove. One thing I've noticed with a lot of 80s movies is how so many of them had cars from the 50s in them. I'm not sure why that is, probably a nod to that time period which many actors had grown up or were born in. This isn't exclusive to horror movies. In fact, the movie Peggy Sue Got Married comes to mind. Yes, I've seen that movie. With the plot taking place in the 50s. This is just an observation of mine, though, and not a detractor in any way. Return 2 has plot holes that didn't even bother to explain or fix. The brother and sister duo were at home while their parents were out for the night. But the course of the movie takes the characters all over town. They even end up at their grandparents' house to get guns, which the house is empty. Later, they try to leave town. They conclude that the army evacuated the town, but how would they know that? At the end of the movie, the army sets fire to some of the remaining zombies, and the characters walk away from the power plant. But what happened after that? Where were their parents? It just didn't make sense to me. What I also don't understand is how and why an army driver was driving with the trioxin barrels in the beginning of the movie. Once again, lack of continuity, because in the original, all of the barrels went to the UNITA warehouse as an army fuck up. So how and where did the army get the barrels in Return 2? And where was the driver going? Then, why was the army all gathered again, like as if they were still looking for the barrels from the first movie? It just doesn't make sense all around. Like the setting of the movie also. Was there any reason why they lived in an up-and-coming neighborhood? At first, I thought that it had turned out that the houses might have been buried on a bunch of graves, but that wasn't the case. I felt like that was a missed opportunity. I know that it would come off as the stereotypical Indian burial ground thing, but at the same time, I didn't see much point in the setting, other than it being by the cemetery, where the barrel of trioxin falls by. The absolute thing that I hated the most is the main character, Jesse. Oh, how did I hate that character? I could not stand him. I absolutely did not care about the child, his bully situation, and his general Dennis the Menace personality. I just couldn't believe that he'd have all these contraptions and various ways to trick people. It seemed dumb as hell. Maybe it's just because I'm a girl or something, I don't know. But it didn't seem believable to me. Another disappointment was how the movie didn't take the time to talk to the zombies. I think that was one of the surprising things about the original, was how the zombies could talk. It was one of the most iconic moments in movie history, where Return 1 had the female corpse talking to the characters. This didn't happen with Return 2, and it barely had the zombies talking at all. It wasn't until the second half of the movie that a couple of them talked, trying the same trick of getting humans to the hospital akin to the original. It felt like yet another missed opportunity. The movie was rather disappointing as a whole. It was too polished and clean for what was supposed to be a zombie movie. It's strange to me that they turned this into a family-friendly movie when only 3 years before, the original had nudity, vulgar language, and a lot of gore. That same year, 1985, Romero's Day of the Dead was also released, yet was so incredibly gory, vulgar, and gritty. There's no way the zombie genre could have been taken as a family-friendly movie event. I'm just overall confused why the movie was taken this way. I had also realized that it wasn't until halfway through the movie, about 40 minutes in, that the first zombie encounter the gang has happens. Why would it take so long to encounter one of the main things that the movie was about? Once again, it's just stupid to me. The soundtrack was forgettable, and despite having some songs by Anthrax in there, I don't remember hearing any of it. The music and sound effects at the beginning of the movie reminded me of the 1990 remake of Night of the Living Dead, though I'm not sure if those were made by the same person. Reading a little bit about it, I'm surprised, but happy to know that Tom Matthews apparently really disliked the sequel. Apparently, the director didn't even like the horror genre. The script wasn't even written to be a sequel to Return 1, so it makes sense that a lot of my continuity complaints exist. In the end, I wouldn't recommend this movie. Maybe watch once, and then never again. I'm never going to watch this movie again, at least not on purpose. Overall ranking, I would say 2 out of 5 zombies. Only because the zombies looked good, and James Karen was funny.